The Reconquista, which took almost 800 years, ended 530 years before the United States declared independence and 470 years before the French Revolution. If you're a history buff, you probably already know all this. But what really happened during the A mixed army of Berbers and Arabs crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and defeated the Visigothic king Roderick at the Battle of Guadalete in 711. We don't know much about Pele, but according to legend, he hid in the mountains with 15 men and then ambushed a detachment of 300 Muslims. In 1085, Alfonso VI of Castile captured the important Muslim city of Toledo. From the 13th century onwards, as Christian armies grew stronger, they began to use brutal tactics against the Muslims. It began in the year 711 with the Muslim conquest of the peninsula and ended in 1492 with the fall of Granada. It was a clash between civilizations, cultures, and religions. It was also a process of cultural exchange and fusion. The legacy of the Reconquista is still present in Spain today, not only in its culture and identity, but also in its history and politics. The Reconquista helped shape modern Spain, and it also helped shape our understanding of history. The Reconquista was one of the most important events in world history. It profoundly affected Spain's identity, law, architecture, and even its imperial ambitions abroad. And yet it remains relatively unknown outside of Spain. This is partly because it happened over such a long period of time, and partly because it has been overshadowed by other major historical events such as the Crusades or the Black Death. But the Reconquista was just as important as these other events, and it deserves to be remembered. Entire villages were wiped out. Men were burned alive, women and children were beheaded, and people were forced to convert to Christianity or leave the country. The violence escalated until the end of the Reconquista in 1492, when the last Muslim kingdom of Granada fell to the Catholic monarchs, Isabella I and Ferdinand II of Aragon. After Granada fell, the Catholic monarchs expelled the Jews from Spain because they refused to convert to Christianity. This religious intolerance would have serious consequences for Spain, which would lose the cultural and intellectual richness that had come from living alongside Jews and Muslims for centuries, an event that was seen as a great victory for the Christians. However, in the second half of the 12th century, two Muslim dynasties from North Africa, the Almohadid and the Almohad, tried to take back Spain from the Christians. They fought against the kingdoms of the north and imposed a stricter form of Islam on the peninsula. Finally, in 1212, the tide turned at the Battle of Los Navas de Toledo. Christian forces from Castile, Aragon, and Navarre defeated the Almohads decisively. This victory marked the end of Muslim power in the region and opened the way for the Christian kingdoms to conquer the rest of the peninsula. Whatever the real story was, this battle is considered the symbolic start of the Reconquista. As the centuries passed, 5 Christian kingdoms emerged in the north: Leon, Castile, Navarre, Aragon, and Portugal. They pushed south little by little, taking territory from the Muslims. But this wasn't like your typical war. There were periods of truce, shifting alliances, and even cooperation between the Christians and the Muslims. For example, in the year 1040, Alfonso VI of Castile asked the help of a Moroccan Muslim ruler to attack another Christian king, and there were many other examples of cooperation. Also, many Muslims converted to Christianity during this period, while at the same time some Christians converted to Islam. All this shows us that the Reconquista was a complicated process that involved much more than just war. It was a clash of civilizations, cultures, religions, and peoples. Within a few years, they had taken almost all of the peninsula, only losing the northern mountainous regions. They established a new state called Al-Andalus, which would become known as Spain. It sounds like Spain today, but it wasn't like the Spain we know today. At that time, it was a diverse and sophisticated society blending Arab, Berber, Visigothic, Jewish, and Iberian traditions. Cities like Cordoba, Seville, and Toledo were centers of advanced architecture, scholarship, and economic activity. But for the Christian rulers in the north, this was a disaster. They saw the Muslims as invaders who had stolen their land, and so they began a long campaign to take it back, which would last for 781 years. What were the biggest events that changed the course of Europe and the world? The story of the Reconquista began with the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula in the early 8th century. The Reconquest started in the middle of the 8th century, when a Visigothic nobleman named Peleo defeated the Muslims at the Battle of Covadonga. During the 11th and 12th centuries, the northern kingdoms grew in power and wealth. But despite these advances, not everything was as it seemed. In conclusion, the Reconquista was a very long and complicated process that lasted for 781 years.